about 5, Professor Dr. Hassan is our speaker, and the session will be held from 9:35 a.m. until 11:35 a.m. And just for a friendly reminder, please use the Q&A section for questions and the chat for the casual discussion. Let's give a warm welcome to Professor Dr. Hassan and make this webinar an excellent learning experience. Let us begin. Professor Dr. Hassan, the floor is yours. You are muted, Professor.
Okay, sorry. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Dr. Zam. And I would like to welcome everyone to this session. I think I presented in the first session, followed by a few other presenters, like we have Prof. Sofri and also Prof. Rosalina from UMK. So my session today will be more into looking at the chapter 3, which is more on research methodology. But before that, I know some of them, there are some of the participants are my former students from other universities who has been in my class before. I would like to welcome you guys again to this particular session. I'll try my best to, I think most of you here has already done a course on research methodology. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail of the methods because I think you have gone through the process in your research training, right? However, I would like to focus on what is expected of you by your examiner based on chapter 3, which is on research methodology. I will recap. Yeah? I will begin by recapping on the basic of that particular chapter, what is expected for you to know, basic principles, which I think I would just touch a bit, but I would love to discuss further. And I wish to, if possible, I would not like to make my presentation that long. I would like to listen from you and take on questions so that we can discuss issues that you face throughout your research work. I know some of you has been making quite a considerable progress. Some of you are preparing for your proposal defense. Some I know are going for your viva. Some just started. And I know some of you comes from different background. Some are engineering and some of you are basically in the area of business. So I'll try to cater for I don't know, say, I will try to cater for as best as possible and see whether, hold on a second, I'm having problem with my slides. Can I share my slides? Hold on a second. Okay, let me share my slides first. Now, where is that? Not used to using Zoom. We are so used to using Microsoft Teams. Now, where do I share my slides? Okay, share screen. Okay, let me share my slides first before we begin. Now, my focus will be on chapter 3, which is a chapter on research methodology. And as you can see, I just introduced my name there. Let me And if you need to contact me, you can find me through my email or my phone number. If I have the time, I'll share it on the chat. Okay, I would like to share with you these photos taken shot in 2019, right before I retired from UTM. I was invited, yeah, I think this is my final PhD viva before I retired in 2019 from UTM. And I was invited to examine the work by our candidate. I remember his name, I've forgotten, from Indonesia. And I was invited as the external examiner. And as you can see, the external examiner is forever cheerful, friendly. So you do not have to worry when you are going into your viva. Now, the candidate was quite happy, as you can see, because he passed with a minor correction. And the supervisors are my two good friends, Prof. Zani and the co-supervisor. He has also retired from UKM. And I hope one day you will also be in this situation where you get a chance to take a photo with your examiners and supervisors. And I hope the best will come, and all of you will be able to go through. I see a raise of hand. Is there any issue here? Someone raised their hand. Are you having problem? Is there any issue, any problem from on your side? Am I okay, Dr. Zam?
Yes, okay, Prof.
Okay, I'm just a bit worried if there is any. You can start throwing your question. Siva, no, is okay. Just can use chat. I think Dr. Zam, they are not able to type on, but they are able to type in the chat. Okay. Now, I would like to do a quick recap on the chapter 3 or on research methodology before I go into the section or discuss with what the examiners are looking for in chapter 3, right? Based on my short experience as an internal and external examiner for the last couple of years. Now, as I said earlier, I'm not going to touch base with the content of chapter 3 in detail, because that will be between you and your supervisor, and also you have gone through a number of training program on research methodology. Now, I think if you, what is happening? Okay. Now, if you look at research process, it is like a journey, right? Assuming that you are going from one point to another point, right? So basically, to get from one point to another point, it takes a lot of preparation. It takes a lot of planning. For example, say I'm going from, I'm now based in Rimbayu, and I'm going to my office every morning. I had to use Waze, okay? I had to use Waze. Every morning I had to turn it on. Not because of I do not know my route, but because I want to avoid any barriers or I may need to amend my route or to decide whether I should take another route if the road is congested. All right, so same thing with your PhD research. It is like a journey that you are taking, right? You have to, at the moment I entered my car every morning, I will turn on my Waze, all right? Not because, as I said, not because I do not know my routes, but because of the data and information that I receive through Waze is a lot that I can process and decide where I want to go. Now, sometimes I don't trust it, okay? I will turn it off and use my gut feeling, and sometimes it is a lot faster. Yesterday, I came back from work, I turned off, Waze gave me another direction, I took another direction, I realized I came back late by 5 minutes, right? So sometimes it's good to use it, sometimes I just ignore it. Okay, so you have to decide which path or which road you want to go. Okay, my office is in Glen Mary, the EON headquarters in Shah Alam. So I got various routes that I can take to go there. All right. So same thing with your research process. You have a number of routes that you can take, a number of directions. So there are also a number of criteria that when I start my travel to work, I have to decide which route I need to take now. Mostly, Waze will ask me to go through Ipoh, from Ipoh out to Subang Jaya, out to Glen Mary. But yesterday was a surprise when suddenly Waze asked me to go through Kesas, Jalan Kewajipan right up to the road straight to Subang Airport, then turn left to Glen Mary. That has never happened to me before. For the last 1.5 months or 2 months, I've been working with DRB-HICOM University. So it does have a lot of surprises. So you have to decide your route to take, how the time, if you're in a hurry, you would like to go through your shortest route so that you can arrive there on time, or shortest doesn't mean it is the best time. I remember when I was working in Kelantan in UMK, I tried to use Waze. It was a big mistake because it took me through a small stream. So I had to pass through a small stream that happens to run across the road. It was quite deep actually. And then you talk about fuel economy. You want to decide which route will save you petrol, or you want to reduce your carbon emission. For example, you do not want to spend too much time on the road or in the jam. All right. So, and also you have preferences for avoiding certain highways. There are certain highways that I would love to avoid by all means. Among them is Elite Highway, but unfortunately every day I have to take that route from Rimbayu, Sarjana Putra, right up to Elite Ipoh. Okay. So your journey is according to how you plan. It may turn out as how you plan, or it may not turn out as how you plan. And you may need to amend the routes because of traffic congestion or a road being closed due to road work. Now with this aid coming in from your mobile phone, this can be reduced. Now coming to research. Research process is just like that journey that I take every morning to go to work. All right. Appropriate research design to answer your research question is like planning to your final destination, planning to the destination that you're going to. In my case, I'm going to work in Glen Mary. So basically, the research design is to answer the research question. So to that, same as me planning to get to my destination at work. So therefore, the research aim is the destination, right? The research aim, what is aim of the research? We have the aim and we have the objective. And the objective, to get to the aim, you have your research objective. The research objective is like your action plan, right? It's like the route criteria, right? What is it that you want to achieve in order to reach your destination? And your research design is your route. Which routes are you going to take? Okay, that will be your research design. You need to, which needs to enable you to reach your destination, and it is crucially be consistent with the objective, right? So basically, the route that you take is consistent with your criteria. So basically, research is like that, all right? You have your destination in a way, and you also have your objective. All right. Now, I mean, as we travel, we use your mobile phone. You use Wave, or whether you use Google app or Google Map or whatever. That is based on big data. So in a way, when you're doing your research now, you have a number of tools, digital tools that can be used to aid you in your research. Right. So research design sometimes need to be amended due to unforeseen circumstances. Now, I have students coming to see me, asking me, Prof, I want to do this for my research. I'm very certain that I will do this. This will be my research focus. I told the person, hold on, do not be too confident, because when you start your research later on, you realize that from time to time, you may have to shift your focus, right? You may have to change, or you have to amend your route you will not stick to that route. Yeah. When I started doing my PhD, I had to change my research focus 6 times. So you can just imagine from neural network, when I make my first move before I submitted my proposal to UTM to apply for my scholarship, my initial research focus was on neural network. Okay, because I'm a quantitatively trained person. Then I shifted, right? That was when I met my first potential supervisor. And then I was suggested that that supervisor was basically if I want to do my study locally, because my wife was not well, so I thought maybe I should register for a Malaysian university. But then after a while, I found out that my wife was getting better, so I can take her to overseas for my PhD. I met my potential supervisor in UUM because he was the British Aerospace visiting professor at that time. And I was happy with him. I feel that I can work with him, and he's so happy with me. He feels that he can work with me. So he went back to the UK when he completed his job in UUM. And I went for my PhD in 1996. And ever since, I was supervised by him. So as I told you, if I mentioned in my first session, my supervisor did not have a PhD, right? But to me, that is not important because he is an industry expert, right? And I believe I have made the right decision, and I finished under his supervision. But then when I got there, I found out that on a number of occasions, the focus was changed a few times because it's not doable, right? There are other issues. And all of this has something to do with the research design. As I designed my research, I realized that this focus is not doable. I have to change, until finally I completed my PhD based on the final one. Okay, so your research design is the route, and like the route, research design may need to be amended. So that was what happened to me. Now, I'm sure you have gone through this in your research training program before. Your research question will indicate whether the purpose of research, the aim of research is exploratory, descriptive, explanatory, evaluative, or combination of these, right? But I think I want to just briefly touch on the first three, exploratory, descriptive, and explanatory, because I think this is quite common in deciding how to achieve your research aim. Now, in my case, for example, I started with exploratory. As I said, my research initially, my fifth focus after changing so many times was to conduct a study on Technopark in Malaysia, right? I was a bit overwhelmed by Technopark Malaysia and also by Kulim High-Tech Park. So I thought, wow, that's very interesting. And I found out that at that time in Malaysia, no one has done research in that area. So I went in for my PhD in that. Actually was I changed because I was overwhelmed by what's happening in Malaysia at that time. MSc was coming up, multimedia super corridor. Then I think it's good to go and do research in that area. But then I realized that it's not possible because there were not many tenants yet in Science Park or Technopark in Malaysia, and it is very difficult to get the right sample size. So finally, I shifted and I focused on high-tech SMEs, right? High-tech SMEs. Why I focus on SMEs? Because I still want to work with the founding or the founder and the entrepreneur and the founder, because my passion at that time was towards entrepreneurship. I've been an entrepreneur before, so I would like to conduct research in that area. All right. So when you talk about exploratory studies or exploratory research, what do? You explore or you clarify understanding of an issue, problem, or phenomena. Now, my issue at that time was why I focused on high-tech SMEs, because at that time, I couldn't find a proper definition of high technology as in other countries. Like America, for example, they define high technology based on the percentage of amount spent on research to revenue, right? In America, for example, if it is more than 10%, it is considered as high tech. 5 to 10% is tech-based, and anything less than 5 is not considered tech at all. This is how American companies are being measured. But in Malaysia, we do not have any specific definition based on research. It is totally based on priority areas, which is considered as high tech, whether you spend less or more on research at that time in 1996. So I would like to explore further what are the other issues, what are the problems, what are the phenomena. So I started with an exploratory study. I wish to explore what are the issues faced by SMEs and high tech. We have SMEs on one part under, at that time it was under SMIDEC. It's not SME Corp as it is now. Another one, high tech, is under, it was under, I think, Mike and Ministry of Trade and Industry at that time. And also Science Ministry was also involved, right? So there's a lot of still dark, unclear issues. So I started with exploratory because my aim was trying to find out the what and how part, yeah, because I want to know what are the issues, how many companies are involved, and on those kind of things. Question that you ask during data collection to explore an issue, basically, or the problem or the phenomena will also be likely to start with what and how. So what is the issue, right? How many companies are involved in what so and so. However, it is flexible and it is adaptable to change. So by using exploratory studies later on, I was able to adapt based on the input that I got. I came back to Malaysia. I conducted a number of interviews before I started with my questionnaire survey. So based on the input that I got, I adapt my instrument from time to time. And then we have, and then you must be willing to change direction as a result of new data that appear and new insight. That was why after my quantitative method that I used to explore, based on the data that I got, based on the findings that I got from my quantitative method, I moved towards the second stage of my research, which is the qualitative method. It was hard actually, because I am quantitatively trained person, right? I'm trained to be an actuary. All my life I've been teaching mathematics, statistics, operational research and whatnot. And then suddenly I have to become a storyteller, okay? And which was difficult actually, but I persevere. And I think I love qualitative method more than quantitative. You ask me now, I would prefer to have qualitative method, okay? So you must be willing to change direction as a result of new information, new data, and new insights. And may commence with the broad focus, but will become narrower as the research progresses. This is the benefit of exploratory studies. And time spent on exploratory study might show results not worth pursuing. This is what happened to me. During my exploratory study, I found out that there are certain part of my research I will just drop it. Yeah, there's some objective which I drop and we can come up with another objective and whatnot later on. All right, but my research was worth pursuing because I realized that at that time, high-tech companies, a new thing in Malaysia, MIC was set up for that purpose and whatnot. And the government was focusing, I think they just started earlier, HICOM, now we have DRB-HICOM, and heavy industries. And I think that there's a great interest for that. And I was looking into how the SMEs can also play a role in this high-tech industry, okay? And then we have the descriptive studies designed to gain an accurate profile of event, right? I think my study was partly exploratory and also descriptive as well. There was no profile at all of SMEs under the high-tech industry. There was no profile at all, so I came up with a profile. I came up with who, what, where, when, how, but, who are the entrepreneurs in the high-tech industry, what was their skill, where do they come from, how old are they, and whatnot, right? And you can extend an exploratory study or conceptualize and explanatory studies. Exploratory, no, I think you can, yeah, you can extend or you can go into from exploratory, you can go into descriptive as well. So necessary to have a clear picture of the phenomena on which you wish to collect data prior to the collection of data. So before you do the actual data collection, to me, I think the qualitative part was important in the sense that because it helps to answer many questions which was not possible under my quantitative method. Okay, then we have the explanatory studies, establish causal relationship between variables. You want to find out why and how. And I think in most cases, the explanatory tend to be more of the qualitative part, right? You want to study a situation or problem in order to understand it and explain the relationships between variables. For example, in my quantitative method, I found out that basically the owner, manager, or the founder of high-tech SMEs do not face, they face barriers in getting funding. But based on literature reviews, based on my interview earlier, I found out there's a lot of funding coming from MTDC, coming in from the government and whatnot. So I was quite surprised to know that high-tech SMEs was not being able to get the funding. So when I follow through with a qualitative study, I found out why. Actually, there were a lot of funding, but when they applied, the funding companies were not able to process because they do not understand the new technology. So finally, they turned it down. Right? They turned it down. So my finding was presented to Mike, and Mike picked it up. I think they started to look into having technology licensing officer and also technology brokers to help them in the process later on. Right? So this is basically the three, how shall I say, the three focus of research when you are trying to address your research aim. Now, I think once then methodology choice, I'm not going to go into details, just that I think most of you are quite familiar. For those in the social science and some of you in the science background or even engineering, you may be involved in quantitative research design. It can be a mono-method quantitative study, or it can also be a multi-method quantitative study. Okay, I need someone to remind me about the time because I may go overboard, but I'll try to stop earlier. Now, you can have one method, quantitative study, or you can have a multi-method quantitative study. I started, my quantitative study was very simple, very straightforward, for a very simple reason, because my supervisor is not a quantitative person. So he warned me, Hassan, make sure when you do your quantitative research, it is reliable, it is valid, but something that I can understand, right? Initially, was having a tough time trying to understand ANOVA and those kind of things. So finally, we decided to appoint a co-supervisor who is an expert in statistics. So Dave Coates was appointed to assist, not to assist me actually, it's more to assist my supervisor because I was going the quantitative way. My method was mono-method quantitative study. So it was very simple, straightforward. At that time, there was no PLS, there was no smart PLS or whatever. It was very straightforward, bivariate. It was not even by sample size. I issue out 340 questionnaires, 310 questionnaires to MSCs. And that time was MSC status companies, companies under MTDC, companies under CIRIM that are receiving the TAF fund, Technology Assistance Fund, also under Tech Park and whatnot. But I only got back 81, which is not rich enough. The data was not rich enough. And I couldn't make, I cannot even go, I had to go non-parametric method, which is not a strong test, but it's still reliable to test my hypothesis. And that was why I followed through with a qualitative method. So I had to use the third one, mixed method research design, right? I had to use a mixed mode. I started with a simple quantitative method. Then I go to mixed mode. It's not complex, I think simple, because I just follow through with a number of companies that I think I interviewed about 15 companies during a period of 3 months. It was quite interesting in that sense. And I really enjoyed it because I created a lot of networking and it lasted until today. Yeah, it lasted until today because of that interview I conducted in 1998. All right, so and then it's all boiled down to these 3 methods, whether you want to go the quantitative way, you want to go the quali way, or you want to do a mixed method. Mine was more on the triangulation because I want to use the qualitative method to validate some of the information or to to contradict some of the information or to explain the phenomenon that I see in my quantitative method, right? It was quite simple design, very simple design. If you look at my thesis, I think about 6 PhD candidate after I graduated pick up my thesis and they followed my model. Right, but the ones already in 1990 may not be valid anymore. there are a lot of new models that you can follow through. Now, we have the quanti and the quali method, right? Briefly speaking, look at the principle, look at the characteristic, okay, associated with both method. For example, if you look in terms of the independent of researcher from those being researched, quantitative is independent, you don't get to see them, you just send your questionnaire and you receive back from them, you don't have even to go and see them. But in qualitative, you do, okay? You have to spend time. I remembered when I was interviewing the CEO of one pharmaceutical company in Bangi. I went there, I spent 1 day with him on a Saturday. He was talking about his career. I never get a chance to ask any question. He was asking about his career, playing golf and everything. And some of the things that I want to ask, he has already responded without even me asking, right? On the second day, when I went there again on Monday, he asked me, why is it did you come to see me? Then only I explained to him what I want to do, what data I'm looking for. So that half a day, I really interviewed him for my research. But part of it I already got when he started telling me about golf and he mentioned about other things which is that indirectly related. So you want to go to the qualitative way, it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of patience and you should be able to transcribe and also go back. You must also be a good storyteller. Yeah, but it's quite interesting. And a term for those taking part, basically, you call them respondent. For those who taking part in qualitative method, I know as participant or informants. Now, in my thesis, I would use the word key informants because I spend a lot of time with the CEOs. And focus of the study tends to be variable and relationship in the quantitative research, but in qualitative is attributed meanings and associated variables. All right. So I think if you are interested, there's one, I forgot the name of that particular professor from UPM. I've attended his session on qualitative research. It was really excellent. If you know the name, can you just type on the chat? He's not a Malaysian basically, but married to a Malaysian. He's and now lives in Malaysia. He is exceptionally good, and to get him to come and speak is not easy. He's very busy, and people invite him everywhere. Sampling techniques tends to be probabilistic, and in qualitative, it's non-probabilistic. Generalization, yes, you can generalize through statistical analysis, but in qualitative, you can only generalize to the theory that you are focusing on. And in terms of data collection method, it's quite rigorous. If you go under quantitative, highly structured, and under qualitative, it is unstructured and semi-structured. Right? You may even have a semi-structured questionnaire. So data tend to be numerical and standardized under quantitative, whereas under qualitative, it is not standardized and generally requiring classification. So we have to classify. There's a lot of software available that will be able to help you out. During my time, I don't think there is Envivo or Nudis yet. Yeah, I think we do have Nudis, but it was just being introduced. It was quite expensive then. Analysis through statistics and diagram, but in qualitative is through conceptualization and in terms of derivation of meaning. The quantitative method tend to be numbers. How do you interpret the numbers? Whereas, as I said earlier, in qualitative method, more of words, spoken, text, and images. So you have to be a good storyteller. And in order to do that, I had to attend a course on storytelling to help me to change my thinking from the left side to the right side of the brain. Okay, because if you're a technical person, you're a quantitative person, you tend to use a lot of your left side of the brain. But to be on the qualitative side, I had to use a lot of right side of the brain while doing the qualitative research. And now I think I can do both. I can change from right, left, from left, right. Okay, so it's a good training. Yeah, it's a good training ground. Now, before we move further, now I want to share with you what examiner look for in the methodology in the chapter, right? I'm sure among those participants today, there are, I think we have 127 participants. I'm sure there are some of you here who are an examiner or a supervisor. If you can, I welcome you to share your experience as well, so that we can gain benefit, because my experience may be different from your experience, right? Now, but I would like to start with this story that happened to me, happened to my son many years ago. When he first came back to Malaysia, I've never sent my son to public school nor to public universities. I do not know why, because I only got one child, so he's the only child that I have. Not that I don't trust public institutions, just that I feel that since I can afford, so send him to private schools, private universities, and let others who do not have the opportunity to go to public schools and public universities. So I noticed that at schools, I sent him to a smart Islamic school when he was still before he started going to school. What happened is that they train my son at that age to write using pencil, right? To write using pencil. You see, because when they train them, they train him to minimize making spelling mistakes, making errors in writing, because when he uses pencil, he can easily erase if he makes mistakes, right? So before they can move up to using a pen, they have to be trained first to read, to write using a pencil. So using pencil, you can easily erase. Now, the moment they have a rubric in that school where they evaluate the student, and they feel that once the student has gone through and passed that rubric, they can go to the next level. They will be given a pen, right? They will be given a pen. In a way, the pen is like a license to them to say that you can now write. You can write well with very few mistakes and whatnot. So the pen is like a license to them, or it's like a license to him, right? And I noticed when he started using the pen, because when you write using the pen, it's difficult for you to erase. You cannot erase at that time, right? So you have to strike out and rewrite again. So they want to make sure that that do not happen. They train them writing using pencil, even calculate using pencil. And the moment they feel that this particular kids can write well, can calculate well, then only they give them a pen. So that's what was happened to my son. Now, same thing here. All right. When you go through the doctoral process, whether you're coming in for your DBA or your PhD, you are being prepared to receive that pen, that license that says that after your Viva, that was what happened to me, that Viva in the photo that I showed. Okay, I went to the student, I told him, I forgot his name, it's from Indonesia. I told him, you passed your PhD Viva, and now we have given you a license. We have given you a license, so that with that license, sorry, let me move one step. With that license, now you have a license to practice research, right? So I shared the photo of Timothy Dalton from the movie James Bond, License to Kill. But in your case, once you receive your PhD or your DBA, you have a license to practice research. Okay, so coming back a bit before I move on to the license. Now, in general, what do examiners look for in your chapter 3, right? Now, in some research tradition, the examiner is understood to be looking for research which is both valid. We talk about validity. I'm sure you've heard a lot about validity and reliability, but do you know what it is, right? And reliable, perhaps replicable. In other people can replicate the research in other areas or other situations. Okay, and in other tradition, examiner looks for trustworthiness of the research process and the credibility of the interpretation. Right. So in my case, for example, when I evaluate students in a Viva, this is what I look for. Okay. In terms of methods, is it valid? Is it reliable? All right. When I say valid and reliable, means can both measure how well that method measures something, how well it measures something. Reliability refers to the consistency of measure. Let's say you want to distribute rice, you take a cup, and that cup can measure up to 5 milligrams of rice. All right, so in other words, all the rice that you distribute will be 5 milligrams because it's based on that particular cup, right? And validity refers to accuracy. In other words, it's always 5 milligrams. It's 5 milligrams, 5 milligrams, 5 milligrams, right? So it is, in other words, that cup is valid to measure that it is 5 milligrams. So same thing in research, when an examiner looks at your chapter 3, for example, they want to see whether your research process or research method is both valid, reliable, okay, and also there's an element of trustworthiness and of the research process, and also the credibility of your interpretation of the data. How credible is your interpretation? I have seen students in a number of viva. I asked them, why are you using smart PLS, SEM, and whatnot? Or they say, because it's now the in thing. Everybody is using. I was so surprised with that kind of response. You don't use it because others are using it, right? You are using it because you want to use it. You want to achieve a certain credibility, trustworthiness, and validity and reliability in your process or in your result. So I was quite surprised. Yeah. So please, whatever, when you go for your viva, you must understand why you are using those two, not just use it for the sake of using it or because others are using it. Now, why research method chapter is just as important as other chapters? Now, the doctorate degree is like a license to practice research, right? So once you've got the license, you can apply for grants in your own right, right? I'm sure for those of you who has applied for a research grant before, normally when you are being evaluated, they would like to see that the leader at least has a doctorate. Okay, has a doctorate, not because of he or she is having that title just for having the title, but because they know that when you have the DR title, right, you have the license. Okay, the license to be called a researcher, right? So you can even teach other people about research, right? You can teach about research. I can teach about research because I think I've gone through the process of getting my PhD, right? And I can supervise doctoral and postdoctoral researchers, students, or learners because I've gone through and I got the license. And most of you who will be going through will also get the license. And I can examine, I can evaluate thesis or dissertation during PhD or DBA viva voce, right? Although contemporary universities and funding bodies often require newly minted doctorate holders. Let's say you just got your, this is what happened to NQA, where they require someone who just got their PhD or DBA within a period of 2 years. They cannot be the main supervisor. They have to be the co-supervisor, okay? Or until you have graduated one doctoral student or something like that, okay? So basically, you have to work with an experienced researcher or someone who's already completed one PhD supervision, right? But in theory, you know you have your research license. Although you are still new, but you have that license. Okay. So examiner looks for as many evidence before they can license you. And through your thesis, your dissertation, through your viva, we want to look at you to see whether you have the evidence so that we can give you the license, not to kill, the license to be a researcher, right? So let me see whether there's any question for the time being. There's a Q&A, there's a chat. Okay, Prof, with a certain methodology, for example, quantitative proposed was approved by the proposal defense can we change to another method when we realize it's not the best approach? Okay, it depends on your discussion with your supervisors. Now, in my case, for example, what I went through was the qualitative was not in my proposal defense, right? So I changed it, I included it later. And I informed the committee member. You see, when I was in the UK, the defense that we went through it's not like we have in Malaysia. It was a friendly. They put the chairs together. We sit around something like around a circle, and there was no presentation. I just tell the committee what I want to do, how I am going to do it. I remember it was Professor Johnson, very experienced researcher. He asked me a few questions, and then they like it. Even Dave Coates was there. They like it. My supervisor was there. So that's it, right? So whatever changes that I made, I just submit it to my supervisor, and my supervisor will communicate with the committee. So it depends on the practice of your universities and also your supervisor. Discuss with your supervisor, right? I know that some universities in Malaysia, they want your examiner for the proposal defense to be the same examiner during the viva, because if you make any changes, in a sense that it will they have someone to pick up why did you change it, thing like that. But I think as I mentioned earlier, it has to be flexible. You have to understand that there are bound to be changes, but you have to justify it. If you can justify, I think it should be no issue, right? It should be no issue. Now let's see if there is any coming in from the chat. Prof, if certain okay, I think I've answered that. We kindly request of every email, blah blah blah. For exploratory studies, which mode comes first, quantitative? Then it depends. All right. In my case, it is quantitative, and most of my students who are under my supervision, they will start with quantitative, except for 2 students, where they start with qualitative first. All right. So it depends on your framework as well. Whether there is a need to start. It also depends on your research question. Right. I think what happened was because they have to go the qualitative way, in the sense that they couldn't even pinpoint who the respondent is going to be yet. Right. So they want to understand who is going to be the respondent for the next stage. So they went in with a qualitative method. They conducted a number of interviews, and then only they followed through. In other words, they start with an in-depth study actually. And then they follow through with a quantitative. They want to explore. I mean, they have already explored. Now they want to answer the research question. They follow through with a quantitative method. Whatever it is, you discuss with your supervisor and get his or her approval. Right? Okay. Let me move on. Okay, let me move on. All right. How do I close this? Did I miss anything? Okay. Let me check whether did I miss anything. Okay, let's move on. Now, why the research methodology chapter is important? A key place, it is a key place where examiners focus their licensing attention. Okay, it's not actually the other part, but other chapters, but it is that chapter. We want to see whether you really acquire that research skills and you deserve to be a researcher in future. So we look at that particular section of the chapter, and as well as your data analysis, right? It is not a mindless ritual. It's not something that you do it for the sake of doing it. Something that need to be done because it is the done thing. Sorry, it is not something that mindless ritual is something that to be done just because it needs to be done. But it is actually the place where you demonstrate that you know how to design and conduct a research. Right? Not just one project, but others in the future. Now, what I noticed is that in most cases, what the student did in that particular chapter is that it's just like another chapter on literature review, but talking about research method. Don't do that, right? Do not do that. Okay. Let the discussion on methods be done on the literature part done earlier in chapter 2, because it is a literature review. Right. So based on that discussion, what is your conclusion? What method will you be using? That will be in chapter 3. Tell us, what are you going to do and how are you going to do it? Because I've came across a number of theses, for example, they were discussing like 10 pages. What is qualitative research? What is quantitative research? Don't do that anymore. right? You're wasting the examiner's time and your time as well. Go straight to the point. That chapter tells us what method are you using and justify why are you using that method. Okay, tell us about your research design, not what other people do. Right? That's why I always tell my students to come up with a summary table in chapter 2 of their findings of their literature review, as well as the method that they use. Discuss it there. Or you can even have, my student, I will allow them to have a section on literature review pertaining to method used by other researchers, all right? And what method they would like to adopt in order to answer the research question. So basically, you have to show you understand and can use the principles of good research, right? We want to see whether you understand, and that's why normally in Viva, this is how I test a student. I want to see whether they understand why they are using the method. Right? I noticed some students they just use it. They use the method because because they say, oh, because others are using it. There's a lot of teachers. Actually, you must relate it to your research question, right? Research related to your problem statement that you have discussed earlier. So good research design and research conduct does vary from discipline to that is no doubt, okay? And also by research tradition. If you are from science engineering, may be different. If you are social science, may be different. That is understood, all right? But note that your examiners will have been selected because they are the expert in the discipline and the tradition you are using, and have been institutionally deemed capable of deciding whether you will be deemed capable and competent. Listen to your examiner. Okay, I had one case, I think it's about, I'm not sure whether, because I left the organization, he was arguing with the examiner, and he was not happy with comment made by the examiner. He says he wants to complain to the Ministry of Higher Education. He said the examiner is not being fair. You've got to remember that the examiner has been identified. They have been institutionally deemed as capable and competent, and they can give you the license. So you want to challenge them. I think finally that guy withdrew the letter. I think he submitted to the ministry, he withdrew the letter, and he finally decided to sit down and complete the correction, which actually doesn't even take him long. Okay, so try whatever it is, your idea is to get the TR title. Don't challenge the examiner, whatever. Just if they ask you to do a correction, just do it, right? The moment you got your DR title, then you are known as the expert. You got the license, right? Then if you go anywhere, oh, okay, Dr. So-and-so, okay, you have a research experience. So it took that person quite some time and almost arrived, and almost reached the ending of the period for him to do the correction. Just because he disagree with the examiner. You got to remember the examiner is capable and competent. You even have not got your DR title yet and you are questioning the examiner, right? The examiner was not happy actually. So finally, I think he submitted. He was lucky because the correction was not sent to the external examiner, it was only sent to the internal examiner. All right, so is the research well designed? Examiners would like to look at the nature of the research question. Is it answerable? Right? And have the key term been explained in terms of the studies? That's why your basically your definition that you use must make it clear. Are there ambiguities in question wording that the researcher hasn't taken account of? For example, ambiguity in the question that you use in questioning. The examiner will try to pick up. Okay, for example, I notice most of the time the problem when it comes to what the term used. Ini ya sudah tua nih. The term the unit of research. I can't remember the unit of analysis. Sorry, unit of analysis. Right. Student tends to make mistakes when it comes to unit of analysis. Maybe they overlook. Right. If the unit of analysis is organization, make sure the questionnaire is pertaining to the organization, not to an individual. So that the examiner will pick up this. They will look at that and to see whether there is any ambiguity in the question, for example. Right? So you must be very thorough in your questionnaire. When you do your, before you do your pilot survey, try to do a pre-test. Get someone to look into your questionnaire, an expert or whatever, and ask them to comment. You must have a one column to the right, ask them to comment that this question is relevant, you understand the question, what's wrong with the question, and let them make comments in there so that you have a very solid tools or instrument before you carry out the actual research. All right? Okay, now moving on. What time is it now? The examiner will consider whether the methods chosen are fit. So what do they look for? Number one, they want to see whether the methods chosen are fit for the purpose, whether they will produce data that would allow the question to be answered in the same way, whether through that method that you have used, you will be able to acquire data that will be able to answer the research question, right? Or they want to see whether your choice of what or who is involved in the research or the sample are vital. In other words, you go to the right sample, don't go to the wrong sample. Assuming that you want to study youth, you will include someone who is above the age of 40, because youth is defined as anyone below 40, for example. Okay, whether the data can be generated by this design will be sufficient. In other words, the data is good enough. This is a big question that most students normally ask: what is the right sample size? Okay, there are tables that can be used as a guideline. There are methods of calculation based on your confidence level and whatnot to even use that. Okay, and show it how you derive the right number of sample size. In other words, they will anticipate the nature, quality, and quantity of data that your methods will produce. Say you use qualitative method, why do you interview 15? Why not 10? Why not 12? Okay, so you have to justify whether the purpose analytic approach to see what kind of understanding it might produce. Okay, method or approach that you use, what kind of understanding, and how this relates to the ambition expressed in the question, in the research question. All right, so whether they use the right method to gain the right data. Whether there is potential for difficulties to arise in the research. This might be ethical or analytical. So they will pick up, they will ask you questions pertaining to ethical issue. And that's why in certain universities, I think MQA requires, I think, where you need to have this ethical committee to validate your questionnaire, right? Examiners look not only for fit, but to see that you understand what this design can and cannot do, right? They will pick up what they can do and what they cannot do, right? So I think do not be, I know some of you are a bit worried when you go for your Viva. You say that's the importance of the networking of your supervisors, right? In my case, for example, when I did my PhD, most of my supervisors contacted someone whom you know very well. And mind you, even my examiner doesn't even have a PhD, just like him, but they are really, really expert in the industry. People normally refer to them. And they did some research as well. My supervisor finally got his PhD. 6 years after I graduated under him, he went for his PhD at Sheffield Universities, and finally he got it. And he sent me an email, son, I finally got my DR. Thank you so much. I learned a lot from supervising you. Okay, it really prepared him for his PhD. So basically, some examiners, they want to look at your where is your missing link in your methods, and whether that's why you have to cover every missing link and do a thorough discussion with your supervisor. Your supervisor is supposed to help you pick it up. Now, my supervisor was very thorough, right? Was very thorough. He will read every line I wrote in my draft and make comments. I remember when I submitted to him 2 pages of my write-up of chapter 2, he will scratch, you see only red ink in the entire 2 pages, right? Initially, when the first time I submitted to him, I was very depressed. I was not happy. I mean, you know what I mean? You thought that you have been a researcher all this while, and suddenly you get someone scratching red marks. But I persevered, right? I took it positively. This is one thing you got to remember when you're doing your doctoral research. take any comment from your supervisors positively. Take it positively. Don't put it in your heart and feel dejected. No. Okay. I took it positively. I rewrite again that 2 pages based on his comment. I submitted again. He scratched again. Yeah, you can see, but this time with fewer red marks, red inks. And on the 3rd time, I realized that he made further amendment to the extent that it goes back to my original write-up. Some of it goes back to my original write-up, right? So that's okay, because in the way that he helped to refine, he will have to refine. But finding a supervisor like him is not that easy. I used to be like him initially when I started supervising. I would follow his style. But when my students, my PhD students started, I think one time about 16 to 20 PhD students, I thought I cannot go that way. It's very exhaustive, all right, very exhaustive. So I started to slowly tone down my comment to my student. I remember at one time, quite a number of times, when I had meeting with my PhD student, he won't be in my office. I will take them out to the beach. We will have a discussion. I remember at one time we went to Taman Kinabalu. We sit down there, we discuss thoroughly. And if we need to use a whiteboard, one of the students is from University of Malaysia Sabah. So he booked a classroom. We entered the classroom, so I will discuss with them using the whiteboard. So that's how my situation works, because I want to create an environment which is not stressful and they enjoy coming to Malaysia for their PhDs. All right, now, number 2, are there any problem with what the researcher actually did to generate data? This is very important. Okay, examiners are looking for processes where there aren't blank spots or blind spot. Some things are where the researchers ought to have seen as a problem, but they miss it. Okay, they miss it. So that's that. Sometimes you have to take this comment from examiners positively, in the sense that they are trying to help, because you may have missed a few spots here and there. They will be able to pick that up because of their experience, right? I've been an examiner, I think, for almost 40 over PhD, TBA students. So basically, the moment I look at the thesis, I can pick up a few blank spots. Inevitably, the research will be done some things and not others. So you will do something, you may miss out others. So examiner will want to know whether you intentionally did this. They will ask you, why did you leave this out? Is it because blah, blah, blah? Can you explain why you did not include this? And why did you include this? So be ready for this kind of question. So they make sure, for instance, that the survey questions have been well constructed. They will question you and ask you, and you will have to prove that it has been well constructed. You have already sent it. You did a pre-test. You've done a pilot survey. They would like to know which question did you take out, why, and what not, and whether the experiment are carefully designed, and that interview questions are inappropriately restrictive and close, and that observation have been focused in line with the research question. So basically, they will always relate to the research question. So research question is very important. Okay, you must put it in your mind. I remember when I was doing my PhD, I will put my research question in the bathroom so that I can see it every day. I will put it in the kitchen so that it will keep me reminded on the direction of my research. Examiners look for consistency of approach. This is very important. It's not just approach, also in your write-up. Your write-up must be very consistent, right? In the way you write, in the way you, in your style and everything. So consistency is very important in your write-up, regardless of whether the research is an emergent process, highly structured, or something in between. So although sometimes the research may be new, not many people have done it, but they would like to see consistency in your approach. They are looking for how the researcher puts the ethical undertaking into practice. This is very important, right? They want to make sure that you do not take shortcuts in your research. I remembered we once in one viva, I won't mention the name of the university, because it's an international student. We found out that he did not really actually distribute the questionnaire. You know how we found out? Because the result was too consistent. So finally we questioned him and he cried. He cried and he admitted that he asked his friend to fill up the question. So as an experienced researcher, you can spot. That's why with that license, you can one day become an experienced researcher. You can spot the inconsistency. And finally, we failed him. Yeah, we failed him. Okay. I think that's about it. I think that's about all that you need to know. We have about, say, like 25 minutes. I would like to open up for Q&A, right? If you so wish. I don't know whether Dr. Zamani, you want me to take it up, or you want to take up the Q&A session. I'll leave it to you. Oh, Dr. Zam, okay, tak apa, I'll take it up. Okay, we have a few questions here. One coming from Sun Yut Min. I'm doing a pure qualitative using case study approach, investigating teacher learning synergies. Wonder a single case is better or multiple cases better. I think to me it's better for a multiple case. I forgot the term that we normally use. Why you use multiple case? Because you want to see that at the end of the day, you stop when you see, my God, I forgot the term that they use. If anybody remember, can you please write it down? When you see the trend when you see the trend approaching saturation. Thank you, David Lau, right? See, that's why it's better to have a multiple case rather than a single case. And when you go for your Viva later on, they will ask you, have you reached saturation? What is your argument, or what is your justification to say that the findings, your finding is can be validated, right? So you see, well, I've reached saturation after 10 interviews or 20 interviews. In my case, for example, after 15 interviews, I've reached saturation. Right. So, and in a way, discuss with your supervisor as well. I'm sure your supervisor is also an expert in qualitative. Siva, should we perhaps cover this, what examiners look for in our thesis write-up? Cover this. What do you mean by cover what? The one that I mentioned. This is my suggestion. But anyway, discuss with your supervisor. Normally, I would say supervisor first. I would respect the supervisor in a way, because your supervisor will understand your work better than me. Right, so this is what I normally look for when I go in chapter 3, for example. This is what I look for when I go and examine a thesis, and it's common also in other examiners. So if you can cover this, right? It's good for you anyway. But whatever, discuss with your supervisor. Okay, what examiner look for is very important, because the issue is I had one cases where we spent 3 hours in a PhD Viva because the student was not able to justify on the method alone. Why did he use this method? Why not the other method? What is your justification? So finally, we had to question him almost 3 hours, and also on other issues which he did not cover in his research. These are the common things that examiner normally look for. I'm not talking about the things that seldom asked or seldom looked for by the examiner. But basically, these are the common things that we look for when we go into a Viva. So I hope you could try to cover it in a sense, because they make your life easy when you go for your Viva later on. Okay. Anonymous attendee, it's good to listen to you again, but I would like to know who you are. Will you please share your PowerPoint? Yes, I will share my PowerPoint. I will pass it to Zamani, and he will share it with you guys. And I'll make sure this time I will put my email address on my slides. Okay. Okay. Zamani has responded. We did not receive. Okay, I'm not going to respond on others. Okay, I think Dr. Zamani has answered some of this, so I'm not going to go into detail anymore. Anybody, you can even turn on your microphone if you want to, if it is possible, and ask any question that you would like to ask. Did I miss any question? Any advice for students going for PD? Very interesting. Now, normally during the proposal defense, you have to present from chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, I think, no, chapter 1, 2, and 3, right? Chapter 1, 2, and 3, where you have to prove that your research is doable, right? Your research is doable. So when you go for, and normally in social science research, for example, chapter 1, 2, and 3 is already part of your dissertation or part of your thesis already. Part of it is already there. So they want to make to justify that your particular proposal is a doable proposal where you can actually conduct research. Now, I look at it this way. When I always tell my students, when you go for proposal defense, look at it as a way to improve on your research research project, yeah. So far, I've never had any of my PhD students fail at the proposal defense level, because I tend to be very thorough before they go. I would have a mock proposal defense, and I will ask the other student to be in the class as well to questions, yeah, to question. I know in some universities like UPM, for example, in Putra Business School, they do allow other students to come in during the proposal defense, and there are certain universities do not allow. Okay, I even when I was in UNITA, I really said that or the proposal defense should be open to all students so that they can also learn when they see, but they cannot ask questions. Yeah, they can do. So focus on your, I think that chapter 1 is very important when you go in for your proposal defense, especially chapter 1. And your chapter 1 should be linked with chapter 2. In a way, whatever you discuss in chapter 1 is highly related to chapter 2. Do not have a chapter 1 which is separate from chapter 2. And chapter 3 also related with chapter 2. So chapter 2 is something like heart of your proposal, right? So make sure that your literature review is exhaustive, right? And remember, the examiner is someone who's expert in that area, so he or she will know which paper to cite, which paper are important for that particular research, right? And you must know your work thoroughly well. Go in well prepared. In my case, for example, I can remember page 5, for example, what is in page 5, page 4, what is in page 4. To that extent, yeah, you must know what you wrote in your proposal. So as you go in, when the examiner please go to page 6. I say, I know what is page 6. So he will ask me a question without me turning to page 6. Right? So then he asked me, why didn't you go to page 6? I think I know what is page 6, and I know what you're going to ask me on. So basically, because I know it by heart, okay, I spend a lot of time looking through it. Okay, I hope that answers the question. Let me hold on a second. Wow, there's a lot of questions coming in. I hope I don't miss any of this. Already email, sorry. Exploratory, I think I've covered this. Okay, let me start from the to determine if qualitative consider two practical constraints to consider how new is the body of knowledge, whether there are sufficient data to be software analyzed by statistical method, other thing being equal correct. Yes, I think you're right. Okay, two practical constraints to consider how new is the body of language, and that's why in most cases we require you to submit to cite papers which is within 5 years from the day of viva, right? At least 5 years from anything later than that are not considered as recent. But sometimes you do have to cite classical literature, so please do, but don't spend too much on those classical literature, because the classical literature is to show the evolution of the theory, right? But spend a lot of it on updating your literature review. Whether there are sufficient data to be software analyzed, but yes, I think that one is you should know better. There are experts in that area you can consult. There's something I need to learn. Take what the supervisor states positive. Yes, that's good. Right. Supervisor is there to help you, to assist you. Okay. Take it positively and learn from them as well. Because I suspect, just like my case, for example, when I supervise my PhD student or DBA student, I will use his style of supervising. Okay. My supervisor is very informal in our discussion. And he tried to make it as informal as possible. Prof, how much sampling size considered enough for quantitative research? This is a very interesting question. that always crops up in any research. Some are using the Craig-Sheik table. Okay, that one is already outdated table, but still being used. I think that should be okay, because as long as you justify your sample size why you're using it, some will justify using based on literature review, for example. So you can use a number of resources to justify. Or there is a calculation where you can use to determine the sample size. But the idea is that you want to make sure that that sample size is sufficient for you to test your hypothesis, for example, or for you to generalize your hypothesis. Okay, Prof, are we permitted to select approach for chapter 1, research objective or research aim? Okay, now it depends on you. Depend also on the supervisor and the format of the thesis of the university. For example, some university will require research aim, then followed by a research objective. There's a difference, between research aim or research objective. As I said earlier in example, research aim is you want to get from point A to point B. And in order to get to point A to point B, this is what you must achieve first. All right? You must, which is called a criteria, you must make sure that the petrol tank is full. So the first objective that you need to do before you start your traveling is to fill up your petrol point. All right? So at the end of the day, when you go to the last chapter, we want to see whether you have achieved your aim. Achieve your aim. That is, your aim is what? Your aim is to come up with a model that can be used by policymakers in deciding blah, 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 blah. All right? So in order to achieve that aim, you have your objective of your research. And when you achieve your objective, definitely at the end of the day, you have already arrived at your aim. So it depends on how you look at it. In my case, for example, I have my aim and also my research objective. Because to achieve that aim, I must fulfill the research objective first. So the research objective is something like an action plan in order to achieve your aim. Doctor, any advice for students? Okay, we talked about that. I'm going through qualitative. Let's say initial target to interview 5 cases, but at the end only get 3 cases. Will that be good enough to say, have you reached saturation point with 3 cases? If you do, that will be okay. If not, then you may have to interview. If you can't get the interviewee with the same characteristic, perhaps you can find a complementary respondent that may be used to achieve what you want to achieve, right? 5 cases, not enough. I see in my case, for example, I interviewed 15. Actually, it was 16, but I reached saturation point at 15. So when I discussed with my supervisor, I said, Hassan, just leave the 16 case out, focus on the 15. So I used 15. So make sure that you reach the importance to get to saturation point. If you do not reach saturation point and you go for your viva, the examiner will question you again. Why do you stop at 3? Why not at 5? Right? So you have to seek out and get more. For example, discuss with your supervisor. How can we choose which analysis technique are best for addressing objective and research? This is very important because I did not go into this actually because it depends on your research question. If you are talking about how and why, please refer to yin. If how and why means normally it tends to be qualitative, right? Because you have to probe deeper. You want to find out why this happened, why the phenomena happened, or how did it happen. It's difficult to be answered by quantitative method alone. Sometimes you have to use both methods, right? So it depends also on your research question. Look at the research question. As I think I've shared earlier here, normally if you go to yin will always say that if it is how and why, then follow through by a case study or qualitative method, right? When I did the master's project paper, I find it difficult in coming up with the regression model. In the end, I followed someone else's model included in the paper. Can you provide some guidance on this? I'm just starting my PhD. That's okay as long as you can justify. All right. In other words, you adopt someone else's model and you use it for research. You justify, right, why you are using the model, and there must be some underpinning theory that explains it. It is okay to use other people's model as long as you justify why you are using the model. Or maybe you want to sort of like modify the model a bit so that it will suit your research. Okay, I'm sure you are just starting your PhD research, and as you read more and more literature, you will see that that model that you have or the framework that you have can be further enhanced. In my case, for example, the model that I use based on 3 constructs initially started with 6, but finally I managed to reduce to 3, yeah, after doing an intensive literature review. I found out that in Malaysia, certain variables may not be suitable in the Malaysian environment, but I do justify that. At what stage is the researcher able to determine the appropriate tools to finish the chapter on methodology? This is very interesting. Normally, when you start to go into, hold on a second, let me at what stage is the researcher able to determine the appropriate tools to finish the research methodology? Now, the moment you look at the research question, you can tell already what method you are going to use, right? For example, when you say a lot of what question coming out, who is coming out, this is where you realize that a quantitative method is the best, right? But when you start asking questions, as I said earlier, the how and the why part, you have to probe further, you have to probe deeper. For example, your question, your research question may focus on trying to find a more detailed explanation to the phenomena, then it has to be qualitative method, right? So you have to follow through with the quality method in your research. Or sometimes you feel that it is a new researchable area, and the quantitative method alone that you use may not be able to respond or to answer the research question. So you may have to follow through with a qualitative method. That was what happened to me, because I was trying to understand why there is a barrier, financing barrier among the high-tech SMEs in Malaysia, whereas all the literature review say there's no barrier in that matter. What is happening? So I conducted a quantitative survey. I found out, oh, there is a barrier. But then again, most literature says there should be no barrier. There's a lot of funding given by the government. So finally, when I conducted through the qualitative method, I realized that, oh, actually the barrier it is because not because the money is not there, but because the person who evaluate the application do not understand the technology. This is one example, okay, and many other examples. So basically, you cannot say when you finish determining, but as your research goes on, you realize that you may have to make a number of changes, right? So it's difficult to say. It depends on what stage of research happening to you. But normally, I think when you start doing your data collection, I think that's where you stop. Is it possible to have 2 theories to support in our study so that we can support our finding? Yeah, I think there's nothing right. Are you talking about underpinning theories or just theories per se? All right, I think that because there are certain theories that you can use 2 or 3 theories to answer, to respond to your research model. How to manage supervisors that is way too ambitious. Ayo. I think in my first presentation, I talked about this. You must be able to manage your supervisor. Don't let your supervisor manage you, right? I think you say the right word, how to manage supervisors that who are ambitious in a way, especially if they just got their PhD. They're very highly ambitious. They want to do a lot of things, and I think you need to get him to know you better and you to know him better, right? And that was why I spent a lot of informal sessions with my PhD student. We will travel a lot, so when we went to Sabah, for example. On the flight, we make sure that we take the same row of seat. So we discuss a lot on the plane. I get to know them better. Then I realize that they do have their own limitation. I cannot expect more from them. I did not know one of my PhD students at that time was a single mother. All right, she was trying to juggle her time between looking after 4 kids, and also she's a lecturer in one of the public universities. When we travel on that plane, then I realized she was trying to juggle her time and whatnot. After that, I understand her situation and the way I managed her, or the way she managed me actually after that, I differently from the way I allow other students to manage me, because her time is very limited. So the only time that she has to discuss is when her kids has gone to bed. Right, so we did a lot of discussion. At the time, online discussion was not the in thing yet. We were using a lot of Skype discussion. Yeah, to see, so she was in another campus in Johor, right? So basically, it's difficult to say that, but you have to let your supervisor understand that you too have your limitation, but not to the extent that he or she will read it as you are problematic, right? Let them understand. I think they are also a human being. For your good information, I'm Farah Muse. I'm planning to start my MSc proposal for next semester. Okay, any advice to junior student? Okay, my son is now starting his research project at Multimedia University, doing his master's. In fact, I asked him to join. He refused to join because he doesn't want to listen anything from his father. He says, I would rather listen from my own lecturer. He's down there. Okay, very interesting. From the topic selection, coming through literature review, methodology, design, sample, instrument. I presume you are in the coursework or mixed mode master's program. That is very interesting in the sense that topic selection depend on it's not a topic. I understand. No, some people confuse between topic and title. Normally, the title will come out at the end of your research. Okay, before you submit, you discuss with your supervisor what's going to be the title of your research. That will be the topic, means the focus, area of focus. Number one, find something that is related to you, something that you are passionate on, something that you love, and also your supervisor can help you in that area. If you do something that you don't love, something that you don't like, you're going to suffer. Right? Find something that you love. That was why in my case, I changed my research topic 6 times because when my supervisor came up with another proposal, I said, no, Abraham, I don't think I want to go to the area. I don't feel comfortable. All right, so he understand, and then I proposed something else, and we discussed further. Finally, we agreed on that particular topic. So whatever it is, discuss with your supervisor. Okay, tell your supervisor, make your supervisor understand that you have come up with a number of topics and discuss with him, not just one. Coming through literature review, yeah, literature review, you have to do a lot of reading from time to time. Yeah, do a lot of reading. As I said in my first presentation, belajar speed reading. Okay, it helps you a lot. There is a video on YouTube on how to do speed reading. Actually, when you read an article, you don't have to read every line by line. In my case, for example, I employ speed reading, so I know what to look for as I read the article. So I can read more articles than before. Okay. And methodology, design, sample, instrument, whatnot. This is the thing that you have to come up with your focus first. What is your research question? Come up with your research question, your research objective, and then you come up with your methodology, your research design and whatnot. Okay. What do you mean by saturation point? Siwa, good question. Now, a saturation point is that when you conduct your case studies analysis, you went to do your interview. It comes to a point that, let's say at the 6th or 7th interview, you arrive to the same point or the same trend or the same similar results, right? And that is saturation. If you go further, you still get the same thing. That is known as saturation point. So when you reach that, you don't have to do further interview. You stop there and you can start writing up and come up with your analysis. Yeah. How to answer if examiner asks how to ensure the reliability and product reliability. This is very interesting question. Normally, it's reliability and validity, right? Whether your instrument, normally they wouldn't. I don't know, I wouldn't ask that kind of question. I will look at the data analysis component, and I will also look at the instrument, right? Normally, the instrument is very important. The instrument that you use will determine how reliable, and your analysis also, your data. The data analysis is very important because that will tell us how reliable is your research. So the tools and also the analysis. You use the right data analysis or the right analysis, and you use the right instrument to gather your data. Basically, you're safe, right? When they ask that question, then justify with your instrument whether you've done very intensive work on your instrument, you've done pre-test, you've done pilot test survey and whatnot, you've done some, you drop some question, you add some question and whatnot, to show that you really work on your instrument. You have to make sure that it is reliable and valid. And also the method that you use is basically you use the right method. Say like you are using, you want to test multivariate analysis, you want to do a multivariate analysis, make sure you use multivariate analysis, which is a parametric method, make sure it's parametric method. Do not use a parametric method for a parametric test, right? So method is very important. how can we make sure ethical understanding into practice during this? I think it's quite simple in the sense that you have your question in certain universities. They have this ethical committee that verify the question. So you have to submit to that committee to verify to show that your questionnaire is ethical in that sense, right? You do not ask questions that somehow or other unethical question. Sometimes there are questions that you should not be asking or whatnot. So the committee will validate that. And in a way, issue of ethical can also come out when, as I said earlier, we caught a student who did not really carry out the data collection. He just asked his friend. So we can detect, we can see the abnormalities of the findings. Yeah, you can easily detect. So these are the things. Make sure that you do it right, in that sense. Yeah, do it right. Do it right. Do it ethically in that sense that you don't fill up the questionnaire. Make sure the respondent really fill up the questionnaire. Normally, an experienced examiner will be able to pick up. So do not underestimate your examiner, right? Because they've been through that before. They've been through the process. I normally tell my students to have a great respect to your examiner. In a way, when you go for your Viva, because it's like this, like kalau you respect your teacher, nobody will reward you back. So in a way, because they are also something like teacher. I'm not saying that you should worship the examiner, in the sense that you should be prepared when you meet your examiner. In other words, sometimes you don't have to give too many information. Yeah, I notice a lot of students, they like to impress the examiner. They give too many information, which is sometimes not relevant. Yeah, that is why in your Viva, when you're asked to do a 20-minute presentation, make sure that you don't spend too much time. Your PowerPoint slides must be PowerPoint. Do not make it too lengthy, too wordy, because your examiner have read your thesis. Okay, when I say point form mean, that's why they call it PowerPoint. The point must be powerful. The rule of thumb is either it's a 5x5 or 7x7 or 6x6. In other words, your PowerPoint slides, you must have a maximum, say by 6x6. A PowerPoint slide must have 6 bullets maximum, and each bullet must have only 6 words. 6 words, no more than that. I know, like what I did is wrong here, as you can see, what examiners look for. I'm not using that that particular rule of thumb because I did not have time actually to adjust my slides. Normally, what I would do is after I put it on the form of this lengthy, wordy statement, I will adjust it. I will reduce to the number of words to only not more than 6 words per bullet. Okay, make it a point. Don't go, because your examiner has already read your thesis. Don't go and try and explain in detail. You go and put a quote of your literature or not. They are not interested. Right? It's just like to highlight back what do you have in your thesis, what are the key salient points, right? And also if you use, don't read from your slides. Put it in the form of PowerPoint. PowerPoint. They call it PowerPoint because it is a powerful point. Okay, put it inside PowerPoint. Either 6x6, 5x5, or 7x7. Normally, I will use 6x6. In other words, I have a maximum of 6 slides. If you have 12 bullets, put it in 2 slides. Don't put it in 1 slide. And last time when we don't have like this online, when it is face-to-face Viva, make sure that the smallest font size is 24. Okay, smallest font size is 24. Make it as big as possible so that your examiner should be able to see your presentation. 18 is normally the minimum rule of thumb, but I will be able to put it at 20 to 24. 24 is the best font size. So I think that's about it. We already reached the end of, no, we're supposed to stop at 11:30, right? Yeah, we still have time. Any other question? Please feel free to ask. I will try to entertain. Even there are some of the participants here are my former DBA student from UNITA. If you got any question, please do ask. I understand some of you, Chef Azrul is here, I think, Chef Azrul. If you have any question, please do ask. Yes, you raise your hand, go ahead. If you want to ask question, go ahead. Can you turn on your microphone and ask? Siapa ni Nick? Yes, someone raised their hand just now, kan? Okay, I will share my slides to the organizer, and can you please repeat first characteristics independent of researcher? Oh, okay, I missed that. Sorry, I did not see that. Mujahid, eh? Okay, can you please repeat the first characteristic independent of researcher from those being researched? This is very interesting in the sense that when you conduct a quantitative survey, you just send up your questionnaire in a way that you do not see who your respondents are, unless if you go and interview them, right? So normally they can just rely on your questionnaire to respond. But if you're talking about qualitative methods, you have to probe further. When you ask questions, sometimes you ask further questions. So basically, it depends on you as a researcher rather than on the respondent. Whereas in quantitative method, it is totally on the respondent themselves. You just need to come up with a good set of reliable questionnaire and instrument, and you'll get the response. But in qualitative research, it depends on the researcher himself, the person who conducted the interview. They keep on probing, asking questions. So it is actually very dependent on the researcher rather than the other way around. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. I answered the question, Mujahid. For the 20-minute Bible presentation, which chapter should we pay most attention to and present it? Okay, highlight the main point. I think normally, I cannot say which chapter. I think normally you've got to have all the chapters in, right? But make it as brief as possible. And I say it in the form of a point form. So you can put many things in there. I've seen one Viva where one lady, she did very well. She did not even have to look at the slides, even at her thesis. It just came up as if like, it's just like she know it by heart. Eh? She know it by heart. It's like water coming out from a tap. Yeah, very smooth. Yeah, and we were very impressed with her presentation. Every question she answered very well. It shows that she knows her work very well. Okay. She got only a very minor correction. Prof, did you use snowball when you performed your interview? Okay, I use convenience sampling in that sense because in the sense that I was lucky because when I conducted my PhD research at that time, MTDC and Mike was very helpful. I was given an office next. My table was next to the CEO of, at that time was Dato Nur Halim Yunus. He liked my research so much. He was just appointed as an MD, he not CEO, MD he took over from Dato Anwar. So he gave me a table next to his table. He called me, Cik Hassan, you sit beside me. I would love to know more about the research, the progress that you're doing. You go and interview our incubator at UPM MTDC incubator at that time. And every time I come back to the office, he would ask me to report, right? So basically, they will provide a list from there. Based on their list, I just select who I want to go and interview. Because there is no standard list. There's no even it's difficult even to come up with a sampling frame. So there was no standard list of what is meant by, in Malaysia, there was no definition for high-tech assembly. So I had to come up with my own definition. And it is based on that definition, it becomes a convenience, okay? So any tip that you can share to get more respondent? All right, there must be a strategy to get more respondent. For example, I did a lot of strategies. Some of them, it's not fail. It is not fail-proof, but your networking is very important. How well do you know people up there? I had a problem with SMIDEC at that time. SMIDEC did not want to share with me the database for ETAF 1, 2, and 3 partner. So I have to be smart. I know that those companies are basically under CIRIM. So CIRIM has the list. I went to CIRIM. I got it from CIRIM, and later on, SMIDEC or SMB Corp now was not happy. I was reprimanded by one of the manager. because but luckily I managed to get from the library. So this is my strategy, my networking. I managed to get from librarian, and finally I became good friend with that manager. The manager who scolded me became my good friend until today, because he realized that I was actually trying to help them out rather than to make life difficult. And he was just appointed as a manager at the time, so being young and his trust level was quite low. But later on, when I finished my PhD, I shared with them my findings. We became very good friends even until today. Yeah, we became very good friends even until today. Okay. To clarify for proposal defense, the slide should not include even key citation and major reference as a DRB recognition. It depends on the university. Consult with your university. For example, certain universities they do not encourage to put the references there because it is not in the thesis basically. The whole idea of having a presentation is just to highlight the key, the salient point of your research, so that the examiner will, okay, now I remember. See, when I did my Viva, there was no presentation. There was no presentation, and I know certain universities are going back to that. The old ways of no presentation. In fact, when I was in UTEM for Viva, there was no presentation, right? I do not know whether it's the practice of UTEM or the practice of the faculty or the graduate school at the time. There was no presentation. The candidate just stand in front of us, we ask questions. Okay, so there was no presentation, nothing. In my case, for example, there was no presentation at all. That's why they call it thesis defense, because I go there and defend myself. They will ask me question. Okay, tell us, why did you use this method? Okay, why don't you use the other method? Okay, so I have to defend why I use that method. I have to justify, because I got to make them happy that this is my piece of work. I did not copy it from someone else. Mind you, we caught one student from another country who practically translated his entire thesis based on a thesis which he got from his country. He translated it into English from the original language. We found that out by chance. Okay, we found out by chance when one of the examiner, I think it was the internal examiner, typed one of the name of the references, and he found out that the original reference was in the language, the original language. It was not even translated into English. So finally, we called him up, asked him to confess. He confessed. He said yes, he did got a copy from his own country. He translated everything to English and submitted. So when it was written in the original language, of course, there's no citation in English at that time. At the time, there was no requirement for publication code. All right, so he almost got through though. He got through with the proposal defense, but we caught him during the Viva. Okay, so be extra careful. Okay, when you do not have the exact number of population, of course, it has to be non-probabilistic sampling. What's happened to me, because I couldn't determine the number of high-tech SMEs in Malaysia. Even high-tech companies won't be very difficult to determine. But I did a simple sampling frame, and from that sampling frame, I used that to select my sample for my quantitative method. But when it comes to qualitative, I just had to use my judgment. As I said, it's more convenient sampling, and I went to conduct the interview. Okay, I think Smart PLS, I think, or SEM enable you to conduct the analysis if you do not know the samples. I'm not sure, because I'm not well versed in that. You have to check with apa nama professor kat USM tu, good friend of mine. Keep forgetting his name. I'm getting old. Apa? Remember a bit of how to differentiate the independent and dependent. Wow, I mean, this is a very basic question between the dependent and dependent variable. How to differentiate? Very interesting. I don't know how to say it, because I'm used to teaching in my statistics class. So this is a very interesting question, basic question. Now, basically, the dependent variable and the independent variable is, I think it's quite simple in a sense that you have to look at your framework, right? Look at your framework. What influence, yes, Prapti Ramaya, Ramayana, is Ramaya, Prapti Ramaya, thank you very much. And okay, sorry. This is very interesting. It's a very basic question. Sometimes the basic question is very difficult to answer. In the sense that independent and dependent. Now, okay, coming back to the question again. Now, when you talk about independent variables, in a sense that, how should I say that? You know it is in your mind, but to say it out sometimes, because I'm so used to teaching statistics, and we present to the student, but coming on to how to, because I have not taught statistics for quite some time already. Now, when you talk about, it's not, this is a very basic question. Isban, have you just started your research? Because, yeah, Tiramaya, okay. That is basically the relationship. Okay, good. Thanks, Mujahid. Independent variable is the predicting variable. In a way, you want to predict something, so you got to have a variable that will assist you in how should I say? It is about coming up with the relationship lah ya. Alamak, ini yang terkena ni. When someone asks a very basic question, professor tak boleh jawab, dah jadi malu lah ni. Okay, because we never ask this question in the Viva. You give me a good idea to ask this question in the Viva again. Well, how do you know that there is a very independent and dependent variable? Normally, you know it through your literature review, right? The model has been there, so you pick up based on the model. I know, but I couldn't say in words because I think normally we don't really explain dependent and independent. Nanti, if I remember, I will say it back to you. This is a very interesting question. Caught me by surprise. This is the thing that normally you have to be prepared. When you go for your Viva, you will be asked with sometimes questions that you never expect to be asked at that level. Yeah, sometimes you don't expect it to be asked, so you have to be. So hold on a second. Let me close my slides. How do I? Okay, stop sharing. Okay, that's better now. Now, let me go and look at the question again. There are many questions coming in. Now, when you say an independent variable, it is a variable that you manipulate or you vary in experimental study, and you want to explore the effect, right? You want to explore the effect. For example, you want to explore the effect of other things. Let's say growth happen to be your independent variable. Why do you use growth to be independent variable? Because you want to explore growth. Right, and you want to know what affects growth of SMEs in Malaysia, for example. Right, so the factors that affect it is known as the independent variable. Sorry, let me go on. Wow, this is crazy when you're asking me things which is very basic. Okay, a dependent variable is a variable that changes as a result of as you manipulate the independent variable, the dependent variable will also change. So basically, if you want to conduct a study on you make me confused already. You want to conduct a study on this is very interesting though. You want to get the professor confused, you go back and ask a basic question. Okay, let's say you have variables changes. Now, effect of the changes will have an effect on say you have the dependent variable. Sorry, you have the dependent variable on one side. You have the independent variable on one side. So the effect of changes on the dependent variable will result because of the changes in the independent variables. Basically, you want to manipulate the independent variable so that it will have an effect on the dependent variable. For example, in my case, I was trying to determine what affects the growth of SMEs in Malaysia, high-tech SMEs in Malaysia. So I found out that there are a few factors, and those factors become the independent variable, and the dependent variable is growth itself, because growth is affected by many factors, right? And that factors is known as the independent variable. I mean, sorry if I got it right, because I will never expect a question to come. Hold on a second. Let me go back to my Zoom. Okay. Where is it? Where did I stop? Okay, thank you very much for those who are helping me out. You're explaining from the statistical perspective. I think you need to explain from the research perspective. Okay, good. Thank you. Mujahid, dependent variable get affected by the independent variable. Okay, data parameters. All right. Okay, good. For those interested, optional, as we shared the micro-credential form, this is coming from Zamari. Okay, Zam, I'm going to read that. It's based on specific objective. It's based on your literature review as well, all right? And also your objective also that, normally your objectives derive from your literature review, right? So basically, you come that up, it comes from the objective and which was derived from the literature review. If you adopt a question for questionnaire from other researchers, do the questionnaire items still need to undergo? Yeah, because sometimes that questionnaire is based on a different setting, a different scenario. Perhaps it is done in America where the scenario is different. So you may need to still undergo to test its validity. What happens if you are using it in a Malaysian environment, for example, where the culture is different, the mindset is different, the way of thinking is different, right? So you still need to go through it. Yeah, David Lawai, yeah. Dependent variable is what we are checking. Okay, okay, thank you very much. Okay, since I'm getting the response from you guys, it's quite clear. Okay, I believe, oh, okay, you're still into discussing on that one. I best believe it is more to cause IB and effect DV strategies. Okay, whatever it is, I'm not going to that area, right? So that is very basic. You can, there's a lot of literature that discuss on that. All right, I think we are about 10 minutes, 5 more minutes. Any other question? Feel free to ask. Zam, would you like to make any announcement? Please go ahead.
I think nothing, Prof. Maybe you can give some information or other insight.
Okay, I think let me conclude for the next 5 minutes in that sense. Normally when, don't worry when you go for a we won't ask you what's the difference between independent and independent variable, because we feel that at that level you've already done enough data collection and whatnot. You would have understand it in a way. But we are more concerned when you talk about your research process. We look into your research design. Research design is very important, and it is discussed thoroughly in chapter 3, right? So when we go in, we zoom in, we look at your problem statement, we look at your research question, and from there, we look at your research method, whether your research method jive with what you discussed earlier. So in other words, there must be linkages between all the chapters that you have discussed together. There must not be any there must be interconnected, right? So basically, it's very important that as you prepare your instrument, for example, you must make sure that whatever is being discussed in chapter 2 and as well as chapter 1 is being addressed in the instrument or in the research method part. So it is very important for you to, I think, when you come to doing research, in a way, as I said earlier, we want to give you that license to become a researcher. So we expect that you should prove to us that you deserve that particular license. Okay, so you must pay careful attention to places in your thesis when you present to the examiner with information about research. You must know what examiners want to see, and do not give examiners information or text without sufficient methods of information. Okay, so basically you don't have to bore down the examiner with too much detail. That's why I say when you present before you begin your viva, don't give too much information, because the examiner has already spent a lot of time reading your thesis. Okay, don't bother them with more information. Sometimes I know some students, they say, "Oh, Prof, this is not in my thesis, so I'm including this now in my presentation." No, they will not take that into consideration at all. They will only base on what you have submitted in your write-up. If you miss something, do not put it in your presentation. We will ignore it. Okay, because we evaluate based on what that is in your thesis. There was one case where one particular student, he missed out something, so he put it in the presentation and he highlighted and said, "Okay, you will present it, but we are not going to take it into consideration. We will only base it on what that is already in your thesis." Okay, so I think with that I conclude my presentation today, and I hope I'm able to answer all the questions, and hopefully if you need to find me, feel free to come to my office, which is in Glen Mary. I'm based in Shah Alam. I'm not in DRB-HICOM in Pekan Pahang. I know some of my students have already come and visit me. So if you have any question that you would like to discuss, feel free to come, but make sure your supervisor knows you're coming to see me, right? I do not want to overwhelm your supervisor's role. Some supervisors are very strict. They do not want their students to discuss with others except with themselves. So whatever it is, I can only help you out, but the final say will come from your supervisor. As I said earlier in my previous presentation, manage your supervisor well. Okay, you must know, let your supervisor also know your weakness. In my case, for example, when I was doing my PhD, my wife was suffering from mental depression after childbirth. I explained everything to my supervisor, let him. Initially I feel ashamed to explain to him, but then the moment I explained to him that this is going to be my constraint, but I will try to overcome it, he understood, and he works with me within my. He acknowledged my constraint, but he assisted me quite a lot, right? Yeah, he is also a human being. Okay, so I think that's conclude. We have another session at 2 p.m. also with me. So I think we'll meet you again here at 2 p.m. today, which is on the last chapter, kan, Zamani. I think it's the last chapter, yeah, it's not last chapter. Okay, so thank you very much and enjoy your lunch. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being here today.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Hassan. The afternoon session will start at 2 p.m. Okay.
I think the 2 p.m. maybe we can do a lot of discussion rather than be a short lecture. Then we can discuss further strategic, like-minded,
Yes. Okay, Prof.
strategic business model.